people, the headlines, the issues impacting you and your family. This Week in Cincinnati on WCPO 9.
Welcome to This Week in Cincinnati. I'm Tanya O'Rourke. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul has been in the middle of many of the most contentious battles recently in Washington. I spoke with him this week about many of those issues, starting with raising the minimum wage. Senator Paul, thanks so much for joining us today. Now, we know you want to talk about your right to work bill, and we are going to talk about that, but I want to get to a couple things first. The Senate is poised this week to vote on the raising of the minimum wage as part of the coronavirus relief package. Will you vote for it or not, and why or why not?
Well, I think it's still uncertain whether we will have a vote on that. There's debate about whether they will try to put that in the budget bill, and there's debate about whether it can legally be put into the budget bill. So there is some discussion of that. On the issue in general, though, I think when you raise the government mandated wage above the market wage, what you get is unemployment. We have hundreds and hundreds of studies that show this. Even the impartial Congressional Budget Office says that you could lose between 1 million and 3 million jobs from this. So it sounds good at first. I mean, if you make $12 an hour, you're like, well, gosh, I'd rather make 15. Who wouldn't rather have a higher wage? But the question is, will you still have a job? And some people will lose their jobs. And the people who tend to lose jobs when the minimum wage goes up are the least skilled. So that's teenagers. And Black teenagers are particularly affected. Most of the studies show that Black teenage unemployment goes up significantly with raising the minimum wage. And I think your first job is incredibly important. My 3 kids all delivered pizza, worked minimum wage, and I think that job helped to teach them work ethic. So I really don't like policy that would limit teenage employment.
President Biden has made a big deal about he wants Republicans and Democrats to be working together in a bipartisan manner. Are you seeing any of that?
I think what I've seen so far is fake unity. He had a great speech, inaugural. Everybody says, oh, he's so nice. We've got a nice president who's for bipartisanship and unity. And what does he do coming out the gate? He tells all the Republicans that come to see him in the White House, see ya, I'm doing my way or the highway. And you know what's going to happen? No Republicans are going to vote for any of this because they haven't been included in any of the negotiations. All Democrats, Kamala Harris is going to have to come on over, and it's going to be 51, 49 or 51-50 vote, and they'll pass it. But it's not good for the country. The way we recover from this is we have to get rid of the government mandates that hurt the economy. It's time to open up. If you look at the Johns Hopkins website on COVID, the numbers are coming dramatically down every day. A doctor in the Wall Street Journal 2 days ago says he thinks we might be done by April.
I guess that begs the question, what do you want to see happen? I mean, you're famous for not wearing a mask on the Senate floor. So what do you want to see happen as far as all the mandates?
Well, the mandates really haven't worked. Stanford did a study of 10 different locations and the mandates and compared the mandates to the incidence of the disease. And as you've seen, almost everybody's wearing a mask. Almost everybody who gets it says they've been wearing a mask the vast majority of the time. And yet the incidence of the disease continues to climb. So there's no real objective evidence that societal crowd changes, social distancing, washing your hands, that any of it has worked. Now, I think there is evidence that vaccines work. There's historical evidence that vaccines work. And I think we are going to change and are already changing the trajectory of the virus with vaccines. I would love to go down this rabbit hole with you for a very long time, but we have a very short period of time. And I got to ask you one more question. It's about the Brent Spence Bridge. It is so in dire of replacement or incredible repair. It's the heartbeat of your Commonwealth and our state, the state of Ohio. What can you do in the next 2 years to fix it in some way, shape or form, or replace it? I couldn't agree more. When I first ran for office is when I learned about the problem with the Brent Spence Bridge in 2009. Since then, I've advocated multiple things we can do. First of all, we spend $50 billion a year in Afghanistan building their roads and bridges. We need to quit doing that. That's $50 billion a year we can spend in our country. So I've been advocating for an end to the Afghan war for 10 years now. It probably hasn't been a good war for 18 years now. We should get the heck out of there and spend that money at home. I've also advocated that the $26 billion a year we spend in foreign aid welfare to other countries, building roads in Somalia, Sudan, you name it. Let's build roads here at home. Let's quit sending it to other countries. And I have one final solution called the penny plan for infrastructure that would tell every other department of government, you got to cut 1% of waste and we're going to take that 1% waste and put it into an infrastructure fund. So these are very viable, significant amounts of money that don't involve new taxes. But the majority of people in Washington, Republican and Democrat, like the status quo, and it's hard to get them to do anything. And so what we do is we plot on. People promise big infrastructure projects where they don't have the money or the funding for, and it never happens. But frankly, if you ask people in Kentucky or Ohio, should we be building bridges in Afghanistan or in Kentucky or Ohio, I think they'd agree with me. Let's bring that money home.
Think we have any shot of getting it done?
Maybe, but I had a vote on it just recently, and I got 8 votes to bring the foreign aid welfare home out of 100. So I didn't even get the majority of Republicans. It's just, I think people are annoyed by it. How about the long lines of traffic? I know we had them on the Kentucky side when the Brent Spence Bridge closed recently. I'm sure you had them on your side of the river too. And when you're sitting there waiting in line, just remember, a lot of your government officials are spending the money that could be spent on that bridge overseas.
When we come back, Senator Paul's right to work bill and its chances of ever becoming law. Welcome back. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky is introducing a right to work bill. It would remove the requirement for employees to join the union in union shops. With a Democratic controlled Congress and a Democrat in the White House, the bill has no chance of passing. So I asked him, why introduce it at all?
Yeah, I'll grant you that. It's difficult to pass. It's difficult to pass even in times when we've had a Republican majority. But I think it's a good idea. 26 states have right to work. And right to work is an encouragement to businesses to come to your state. Kentucky's gotten business since we've become right to work in the last 2 or 3 years. Good example, South Carolina, Alabama. Alabama got several car manufacturers because they were right to work. South Carolina got Boeing to move its new facility from Washington to South Carolina because they're right to work. So I'd like to make the whole country right to work and try to encourage people internationally to say, let's choose the United States again. The law doesn't create anything new. Basically, it gets rid of some things from the 30s and 40s that said that you could fire people because they didn't want to join a union. I'm not against collective bargaining. I actually favor collective bargaining for trying to get good wages and also trying to get good prices. I'd like to use collective bargaining to bring down health insurance premiums and let consumers organize. We'd have to change the law to allow that. But I'm against people not having a choice when they work someplace, whether they want to be in a union or not. I think they should have that choice.
But you see why people think this is a union buster, don't you?
Well, it actually isn't. And I think what you find is that it doesn't break up unions really at all. But what it does is encourage businesses to come in and not feel that they have to have a union or that they're going to become unionized. It makes it, I think, basically more towards the marketplace, where the marketplace determines it and workers can voluntarily join a union or not. It takes away the coercive aspect of government. And so it doesn't really mandate anything. The interesting thing it does is it repeals section of old law. But the bottom line is it's been good for the states. You know, if we keep it the same, Kentucky loves it because we're now at an advantage over the states that are not. The statistics are overwhelming that the right to work states have better economies and more economic growth. So if the rest of the country doesn't want it, that's good for Kentucky. But I'd like to see the whole country do it.
Okay, you and Mitch McConnell, oddly, seem to be at opposite ends of the Republican spectrum right now. You were very much a Trump supporter in many ways. He has become not a Trump supporter. How does that help the state of Kentucky that you represent?
You know, I think it's more complicated than that. And a lot of people see me as just a Trump supporter, and I have been, but I've also opposed him on policy issues when I thought he was wrong. I haven't been for the $2,000 checks. I voted to certify the electors, not because I thought the election was perfect, but because I think the states, once they certify the elections, Congress shouldn't overturn it. When the president wanted to move funding around for the wall, that Congress had spent the money somewhere else, I thought that was an abuse of these emergency powers and opposed him. So actually, I've stood up to him many, many times on policy, and he knows it. But I've also supported him when I thought it was partisan. So the most recent impeachment, having a partisan Democrat oversee an impeachment who had already said he was for impeachment, made it a farce. So it was a farce from the beginning. Chief Justice wasn't there, wasn't constitutional. And really, if we'd used the same standard, Chuck Schumer could have been impeached for inciting a riot at the Supreme Court just months ago. So really, I think people believe that people should be judged on the same kind of standard. There should be one standard for Trump and another standard for everyone else. Thanks. I think we got to run.
Senator, appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem.
Ohio has created a record number of new businesses during the pandemic. When This Week in Cincinnati returns, anchor Craig McKee talks with Ohio's Secretary of State about that and election security for the upcoming May primary.
Welcome back to This Week in Cincinnati. I'm Craig McKee. Ohio experienced something last year you might not expect in the middle of a pandemic, a record-setting explosion in the start of new businesses. This, according to figures just released by Ohio's Secretary of State, Frank Larose. I spoke with him this week about that issue and what we can expect from his office during the upcoming May primary.
Ohio Secretary of State Larose, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Talking about businesses during the pandemic, so much news coverage has really been about businesses that are struggling to get by. But you have seen, and your office has seen, pretty much a record number of people creating new businesses. What does that tell you?
It's a remarkable thing. I mean, we thought in the beginning of this pandemic that we were just going to see new business formation drop off. But what we've seen is that Ohio entrepreneurs are incredibly resilient. They've found ways to continue to grow and start new enterprises here in this environment. We saw last year, we shattered the all-time record, and we're on pace again. In fact, in January, we were 51% above January of last year, with close to 14,000 new businesses started. What it tells me is that Ohio entrepreneurs are fundamentally optimistic about the trajectory of the state of Ohio. And when we emerge from this current chapter that we're all working through, I think that Ohio is going to be well positioned to thrive economically.
Is there any indication that these registrations were part of pre-planning, pre-pandemic, and just kind of carried over? Or is there any indication that these were people that maybe were quarantined at home, had an idea and said, you know what, I'm going to be out of a job soon. This is an idea I always wanted to launch. Let's do it.
Craig, they're all different things, right? And we know that a new business formation, or this record of new business formations, it's not a perfect economic indicator. Many new small businesses never go on to become profitable. In some cases, it may have been a business reorganizing for tax purposes into separate entities, for example. But again, what it tells me is that there's a fundamental optimism among entrepreneurs. Now, anecdotally, the stories that I'm hearing out there are stories about people that maybe not getting the hours that they're accustomed to getting in their service job, and so they're at home more, and they're going to start that work from home business, or that family member that has to sacrifice to be home with the children that are doing remote learning and not able to go to the factory job that they had previously, and so now they're going to start that work from home business that they've always dreamed of. And so really good stories out there.
Is there any type of an average employer? Because obviously some of these companies that have been established probably have maybe 20, 25, 50, maybe even over 100 employees. There are others that may be just sole proprietorships, one or two people involved.
So the large majority of new companies that start with us, right, a new business that's just getting underway, is that one or two person enterprise that's just getting up and running, and that's what we see in the numbers that we get.
Now, I have to ask, obviously, the federal government, there's so many programs during the pandemic that have offered up billions of dollars to businesses to keep them afloat. Is there any type of checks and balance system in place to go back and look at these businesses that have been formed to see whether it was a money grab or if it's a legitimate business?
Well, of course, the programs that were created at the federal level, for example, through the CARES Act and some of the things that have been done at the state level, they all have components of fraud prevention that are built into them. Of course, the various inspectors general of different departments look into those things. And of course, when there have been inquiries by federal law enforcement or whatever, we work very closely with them to turn over any information that we have. But investigating that kind of thing is certainly not a function of our office.
Okay. Now let's switch over and talk about the May primary here. Obviously, you mentioned the word election, yeah. And having just come out of a presidential cycle, you mentioned May primary, and then there's, questions of voter fraud and all these things that come up just because of what we've just survived and gone through. What is your office doing come the May primary, expecting, obviously, I would assume, lower turnout? What is your office doing to remind people and to reinforce, even in those in the echo chamber world of voter fraud, that indeed their vote will count when they go to the ballot box?
Well, Craig, for us, we think about elections every day. Same with your county board of elections, all 88 of them around Ohio. But you're right. For the average person, they feel like, well, didn't we just get done with the presidential election? But for us, spring election's kind of that sign that winter's coming to an end as well. It's like when pitchers and catchers report for spring training. You know, we've got a countdown clock here, and it says early voting begins in 40 days. So our spring primary is right around the corner here in Ohio. It's important for Ohioans to know this. First of all, these elections are really important. We all tend to pay a lot of attention every 4 years, and it matters who lives at the White House, don't get me wrong. But what matters just as much is who works at the schoolhouse and the courthouse, at City Hall. These are the kind of elections that are determined in a year like 2021. And so, yes, we can anticipate lower turnout than a presidential election, but we're going to do all that we can do to boost that turnout. And one of those things is by reinforcing the confidence that Ohioans should have in our elections. Now, one thing is clear. I think that Ohio in many ways is a national example. I think that we're a leader in the nation of both making it convenient and simple for people to vote, but also making it a trustworthy process that people can believe in. And so when we get the chance to educate people, and that's one of the good things right now, I think people are more interested in the nuts and bolts of elections administration than they've ever been, or at least in recent history. So it gives me a chance to talk to people about the fact that we do a full post-election audit. And in November of 2020, we started that post-election audit. It concluded in December of 2020, and it returned a accuracy rate of 99.98%. The fact that Ohio's voting machines are never connected to the internet. In fact, it's a violation of law to connect them to the internet. That every ballot has a hard copy paper trail that allows us to do that post-election audit. The fact that everything in elections is overseen by both Republicans and Democrats in a completely bipartisan chain of custody and a bipartisan process. So those are the kind of things that I can present the facts to tell Ohioans why they should be able to trust their elections and why their elections are so important to participate in. And if people have more questions, if they want to get a master's degree in elections, sign up to be a poll worker. Your county board of elections would love to have you. They'll train you. They'll even pay you for your day's work. When people sign up to be a poll worker, they come away from that experience more confident than ever in the accuracy and honesty of our elections.
We have about 60 seconds left here. You know, we're still in the pandemic. It's not going to be gone by election day, by the primary. Are there any changes that people can expect as a result, or are you leaving that primarily to the local boards of election?
Well, just like we did in November, we've got a lot of the same standards in place. We've asked the Ohio Department of Health to review that and make sure that it's up to the most current science. We put out a 61-point checklist last November that was really, it became a national model for sort of organizing the work of making sure that those polling locations were safe. We fielded tons, literally tons, of personal protective equipment for every polling location. I was able to tell Ohio voters and Ohio poll workers, if you feel comfortable going to the grocery store, you should feel comfortable going to your polling location. And the same scenario will exist for this May's primary. But if you don't want to go to a polling location, you've got a month of absentee voting and a month of early voting. So Ohioans have a lot of good choices.
All right, Secretary of State of Ohio, Frank Larose, thank you so much for your time on these topics. Look forward to talking to you in the future. And again, thank you for your service.
You as well. Thank you, Craig.
This week in Cincinnati. We'll be right back.
The results of last year's census will determine everything from how many seats states have in Congress to local federal funding. Well, now Ohio has become the first state to sue the Census Bureau over its plans to delay the release of its figures. The suit filed this week claims the delay will make it impossible for Ohio to draw its congressional and legislative districts by the required deadlines. The original deadline for the 2020 figures to be released was March 31st. It's now pushed back to September 1st. The Census Bureau blames the pandemic. We want your opinion about any of the stories you see on WCPO 9 News. Call our Feedback Friday hotline, 513-852-4998. My co-anchor, Craig McKee, will share your thoughts every Friday night at 6. That is This Week in Cincinnati for this weekend. Join us for breaking news, weather, and sports at 6 and 11 tonight on WCPO 9 News. Plus, we are always updating your headlines. You'll find them on WCPO.com. I'll see you again Monday.